We saw something blip and made a few phone calls, and suddenly we realized that we were in for it. And that was kind of a career-defining moment for a lot of us back in the day, right? Like, we really experienced the sense of, this is going to have real ramifications. This will be industry changing. All points leading up to it were a lot of pain and suffering. But once we got to that point, we knew we had a template for success. And that was something that I think really brought us pretty far forward in the era and contributed to a lot of really interesting outcomes.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Fraud Boxer. I got a fun one today. Looking forward to this one. I got Seth Ruden from Transmit Security. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing, Jordan?
I'm doing great. You know, before we just jumped on here, we were talking about the weather. The weather's good for you up in Oregon. It's great for me here. The Masters is on. That's why I have my green on. So today's a good day. Today's a really good day. So, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about you. How did we even meet? I think it actually came through a mutual colleague of ours.
We had
right?
a referral. So this is a guy I probably should know. That you do a lot of good podcasts and have great reach, and we want to spend some time getting the word out about what we think is coming.
And coincidentally, we both have guitars behind us.
Yes,
you have yours on the wall.
Yep.
I see you got a Telly back there too.
Got a Telly LS and the Taylor.
Yeah. So literally the same thing. Taylor, well, the Fender. That's my first guitar, and then a Nashville Telly, and then an Epiphone Les Paul. But it's one of the Korean ones, which was like when it came out of the factory. That was like the factory you wanted to. It sounds great. Love that guitar. So let's talk a little bit about you. We'll start with who you are, why you're even here today, because you have an interesting story about how you even got into the fraud and cyberspace, which I always love these cyber episodes. It's something that I'm a little more passionate about. I think, like, obviously fraud is like my bread and butter. It's what I do every day. But cybersecurity for me is interesting. So tell me a little bit about you and how you even got here.
Okay. So, I mean, we all have like an origin story, right? And I think the one that I like to go with is, it was early days. I think it was like 2004, 2005. I'm an intern, getting through college, and, I'm scrubbing the OFAC list. So it's like, just a series of, F8 after F8 for hundreds of thousands of lines every single day. And then suddenly one day there's a terrorist, and he matches on like date of birth and first, last, and other government docs, and it was just a rush. And once you like get that, okay, wait a minute, I can't just do audit or compliance. I got to like really dig in. This is where I got my fix. And so then I started playing a little bit more with rules and KPIs, and had a couple of wins. We found some interesting stuff, and identified a couple of real significant breaches. Heartland, remember that one? That was good old days. And we saw something blip and made a few phone calls, and suddenly we realized that we were in for it. And that was kind of a career defining moment for a lot of us back in the day, right? Like, we really experienced the sense of, this is going to have real ramifications. This will be industry changing. And so we found ourselves after this point in the big financial crisis, right?
Yeah.
And I went over to just start doing consulting and rule writing for hundreds of banks at one of the national processors, and that was just a riot. And I really got a kick out of doing common point of purchase analysis and figuring out which merchants got popped, and then working it out with my friends and to build up a network of other investigators and fraud analysts and strategists, and that really became a thing. And years and years and years of that, domestically and offshore, and I wound up running the fraud shop at my native credit union, and they were having a crisis at the time, and we decided that we were going to do something really unique there. They were the first ones to take it, and really like experience this account takeover social engineering scheme on the Zelle side. And we decided to wrestle the bull to the ground. And so we went from zero to hero in about 2 weeks. and all points leading up to it were a lot of pain and suffering. But once we got to that point, we knew we had a template for success. And that was something that I think really brought us pretty far forward in the era and contributed to a lot of really interesting outcomes.
So, not to like wax nostalgic because, it's not even on our thing, but like that just took me back like to when I first started in this space. Right now we're like super automated. There's just a lot of machines doing the heavy lifting. That's just the nature of the way that it is these days. And like there's so many attacks. Like actually just had a guest on recently. It's the CEO of another company that said, he thinks that fraud is going to be the biggest economy in the world at like soon. Like there's going to be more money coming out of like fraud losses than there is out of any specific industry, which is a big claim. But if you really think about the scale that it's going, it's crazy. But like, and that will include scams in that too. But like it used to be when I first started in this, like the rush that you talked about with the Heartland thing, when you discovered something, it was a big deal. And it was cool to know about something before it became public. And then like to be talking about what you're going to be doing about it. But also for me on the fraud side, I used to be able to catch these bad guys. Like I used to be able to actually get enough engagement that like I would catch these bad guys. Like I've put multiple people in jail. I've been involved in multiple national cases that you wouldn't even think that a transaction fraud guy would be involved in, like theater shootings, theater bombings, like all sorts of crazy things that like my data ends up touching and that like investigators need. And it was super validating to like see these cases through to the end. And I feel like we just don't really get that anymore.
We sure
like
don't. I had one many years ago that really stands out. You remember Gosnim? That was a piece of malware.
Probably.
So at that moment, I was running a online banking managed service, and we got under the attack of this piece of malware. And the guy was running out of Eastern Europe, and he was putting this malware at the endpoint, and we would see spinny beach balls on the user side, and he was man in the middle session, and he would be sending a transaction to a new beneficiary. Well, he won a trip to Guam.
That's not a place you usually want to wind up because you're going somewhere else at the end of that.
Yeah, so he got off the plane and had a nasty arrival by his receiving services, and that's how that ended up. That's one of my favorites, but those are few and far between, aren't they?
I don't think I've seen a case from my side go through to any sort of conviction or even any sort of case in more than 10 years. I think if I'm really going back, like it's been a long time, because even when I was in my Ticketmaster days, like it's more abuse than it was like pure fraud. But like, and then the friendly fraud. I mean, that's what probably that could be a part of it too. Is like the friendly fraud has exploded so much that like it's usually the cardholder participating or a family member participating, and they're not going to press charges against their son, or their grandson. And then like for ticketing, it's like someone trying to pull the fast one to get into like a Super Bowl or even like a big fight. Those are the high dollar ones, like regular 21 Pilots shows or things like that. It's the dollar amounts just. It doesn't really matter. They'll make the merchant pay for it, and then they'll just move on. Like you just don't get like the excitement that we used to get, I guess, from this, because it's just so digital now. Yeah,
and it's interesting. There's been a strategic shift, I would say, and that strategic shift, and you'll hear people talking about move the kill chain left, and it's all about preventing the fraud from being realized in the first place. What if we can stop it before it becomes a problem? And I think that really speaks to a handful of things that are happening in the industry right now. First and foremost, we're always being asked to do more with less, right? It's a hard thing to get FTE. It's a hard thing to keep FTE. It's a hard thing to grow your staff. I mean, it's necessary, and you got to create bench strength. But I think one of the things that really has pushed us in this direction is, well, what if we can get away from doing such a thing by understanding the risk behaviors, the risk signals, device and network, or even machine signals, bots and now AI, and be able to identify these earlier on in the cycle and prevent them from becoming. And I think that's kind of the thing that's starting to emerge as more the best practice. I mean, we can stop more alerts, we can stop more customer friction if we identify those things early, and that takes a little bit of cake away, because now we've got less battle to go into, and I personally love battle.
So me too.
Yeah.
And like, to your point, like that's where I think you do start to see like the fraud and cyber teams merging a lot more than you used to. Like I too, to your point, have been a big like advocate of moving it earlier in the funnel. I think I've been saying that since like even right before COVID, when I'm still on my auth rate thing too. But like, you know, you have so many downstream effects if you let people through. Like you have inventory tie-ups, you know, you have, even if you let somebody off and you cancel them even post off, like you have to pay for your auth on that. Like there's so much money and other things that like promo codes and all those things that can be stopped if you just stop them from creating the account or even accessing your site if you're that sophisticated to begin with. But also the ATOs, you know, when we got more sophisticated at fraud prevention, the aged accounts, because they always thought that if the account had history, which a lot of times it does give it a little more credence on there. Now, I think that a lot of us have moved to, we take a transaction by transaction case basis on how we're evaluating the risk on that, less so than how the account is aged, but you still see this reemergence of ATOs because they still is perceived value in the age of an account for whatever you want to do. And like those accounts, like I just had another episode out where I talked about like the value of an account for ATOing isn't the stored credential anymore. It's what's stored on the account. It's the information that's contained inside the account to fill in those blanks. Like for maybe I don't have your phone number, but I have part of your address, or maybe, you know, you have a partial social security number exposed in some, I don't know, like IRS website or something. But there's so many different values to these accounts where you see these ATOs. So it becomes crucial, like absolutely crucial, to stop them earlier in the funnel. Like being at transaction, it's fun and you can say a win and you can see a win, but you're not doing your company any service by still continuing to put it there. It needs to be, to your point, holistic customer journey. So, yeah. Well, and you know what? Coincidentally, that's what we're going to talk about today, right?
Brilliant. Let's do that.
Jordan jumping in here real fast. If you've been around this industry a while, you've probably seen a fraud vendor show off their network graph. Devices, accounts, connections, all mapped out. It looks impressive. But without a strong enough device ID behind it, the moment the fraudster reinstalls the app or resets their device, that graph starts lying to you. But Incognia's network graph is built on something the others are missing: a sticky, tamper-resistant device ID. That persistence is what makes relationships accurate and actionable. The connections hold up, the behavior accumulates, shared Wi-Fi network surface. Instead of fragments, you get the full picture of one actor's behavior over time. Scan the QR code below to learn why most network graphs break down over time and what to look for instead. Now let's get back to the episode. So when we were doing prep for this, you had mentioned a lot more. We're specifically talking about like getting accounts, scam preventions, those sorts of things, and the tools that can exist in how to move those things earlier in the funnel. So I know for you guys, specifically at Transmit, you guys have a no code, which usually means you sit at the CDN level. So I purposely didn't do a whole lot of investigation on that, so you could tell me about that. But I also don't want to make this like a commercial for Transmit, because we're supposed to be providing value here at the end of the day. So tell me a little bit about like what you think the approach would be in an idealistic way to start doing this. If I was today, me, and I was doing transactional fraud only, and I realized I was getting ripped too hard, what should I start doing? What's day one for me?
Well, so yeah, let me bring it back one more time. Sure. I'll do this just for the plug, and then get off the soapbox. But one of the big benefits of joining Transmit for me and for the customers is that we create something around identity and fraud linkages that do not exist in other places. And if you're already putting your access management into your web function, your web portal, you've already got a low code or no code environment that's primed for the collectors that we would deploy for fraud telemetry, behavioral biometrics, device identification and risk indicators, network detail. When you have identity in there as well, and you can trace the account journey from account opening, marry that to onboarding, marry that to account takeover and ongoing transaction monitoring, you've got a very effective and efficient deployment model. And that can be very challenging with other vendors because they got to get all of the code on all of those other pages. And that's pretty costly and intensive. And so with Transmit, it's pretty easy to create this from a identity Siam approach and be able to have this thing ready to go. But you get these collectors in place and suddenly it's like turning on the lights, right? Like you've got all of this new detail, you have all of this new visibility. I always like to say when the lights go on, the cockroaches scatter, because you're seeing a bunch of stuff that you didn't see before. Remote access tools, copy and paste signals, so much behavioral activity that was just invisible before.
Yeah.
And when you have that, you make better decisions with higher precision because you've got so much more and richer data sources that you can apply to placing friction where you want to at further points within the transaction journey. And so it's a pretty big advantage in terms of being able to apply the controls that you want and really align and optimize that kind of friction. That's really one of the largest new advantages that we have now. And as we go into this next environment, I mean, in the last 5 years, we've been dealing with account takeover and social engineering, and now we're into this new space solidly, where you've got about good coverage in the account takeover space and social engineering. Controls have been fairly well deployed across the industry and starting to get some maturity, but now we're in this authorized push payment era, and then right in on its heels and probably crossing into the Venn diagram, we're going to be in the Agentic AI era, and that's really going to cause some pain.
We are required by law to say Agentic AI on every podcast related to cybersecurity.
It's real, man. Like I'm playing with this stuff all the time. I'm building things. I'm having a lot of fun, vibe coding, weird and cool new tools for me and my friends. There's something that's really going to happen here. I think that's going to change society in a not inconsequential way. And I think when we start plugging that into accounts and open banking, which we've been talking about for a long time, and starting to build agents that do like real things for us, buy tickets and make reservations and planning and doing all these things that take a lot of time for us, the logistics of our lives. That's going to be pretty instrumental in terms of being able to enable the people that embrace it and enable the fraudsters who embrace it to malicious ends.
So that is such a good point. There's a lot in there. And I think to go with what's happening now, and with the agents, we'll just include the agents in this discussion here, is like, one of the problems we started having earlier a few years ago was our fraud prevention tools at transaction became more widely known, that they existed in the communities, with Telegram and Signal and these things where people can chat with each other and figure things out a lot quicker. The bad actors are a lot more mobilized to deal with what we put in place for them. So you started seeing a big rise in unknown sessions because they're blocking our JavaScript tags, or they're blocking any sort of beacons that exist. They're cloning the apps and ripping out the SDKs and then reloading them on Android devices, and even some of the iOS devices, jailbroken ones. And you're seeing us get less intelligence with the tools, and the tools are trying to do more with less, which leads to false positives. But when you have tools, to your point, where that can see a larger journey, so like even tools that are deployed like in like Cloudflare workers, for example, and I don't know specifically if that's how you guys do that, but however you guys do it, usually it's more DNS based, where it's impossible for them to not be seen by these tools. And that leads a lot more intelligence and information and ability to make those decisions. And to your point, like, we can introduce frictions at different points. So let's say, like, for hybrid approaches is where it's usually a big thing that where you see, somebody, they scripted up to a certain point, and then a human took over to maybe decode a CAPTCHA or do something like that, and then started moving on again. Now with agents, we're seeing agents being able to solve those sorts of things and get past those defenses. But you can do more like customization, because like a great example is at my company. Our executive team is hypersensitive to any sort of friction in creating an account. Now, and I get that, because for me, as a fraud guy, I automatically think everybody's up to something when they come on my site. So I would want to, 2FA the people trying to buy vitamins, or, you better do an IDV, document scan, show me your ID. I'd love to be able to do that, because then I don't have to worry about things as much anymore. But that's not the reality of my situation. So I need to be able to use tools in a very, very, very strategic and very precise fashion to make sure that any friction that I pop, I'm almost absolutely certain that they're going to fail it because that's like, we would count, like how we kind of look at it, because we do use some tools in this space and in these places, is we look at any time that a customer solves a friction point as a false positive. And that way we're trying to update our models and update how we approach a situation, because we don't want to have to put those things in place unless we're absolutely necessary. But then it brings you all the way to a catch-22, is if those things are so absolutely necessary for that population, why are you just not declining them to begin with? Like, why are you even prompting them with friction when you should just be so certain that they're just gone? So I do like the ability to, like, let's say I see somebody log in, looks good, great. From a normal IP range, normal area in their house, maybe even the same device, could be a compromised device, as we've just talked about. But then all of a sudden it goes to the account details page and it changes everything to a completely different country. Like, at that point, I need to be like, something's up here. Like, maybe we do a friction there instead of just letting them go, because, as we know in this space, average user doesn't log in and go to their account details page. They just don't normally do that, let alone then update everything to a completely different area.
Right.
But those are things that, like, you're missing. Like, for me in my traditional fraud space, I'd be missing that. I would have none of that intelligence, nothing to factor in. And then I would just see the next purchase come through. And maybe they're doing, within a new thing that people are doing is they're using address 1, normal. And then on address 2, they put where they really want the package to go. And then they call the shipper and say, we want to redirect that. And technically it gets around their limits, like, and their restrictions, because that address is on there. And it's just, oh my gosh, I accidentally put in my old one at the top. And as you can see, it's on there, the new one. I accidentally copied and pasted the wrong place. And they get around the redirects. So we're seeing things like that, which again becomes a hybrid approach. It's 2 parts in there, there's still a human element of that. But yeah, I said a lot in there. I'm gonna let you commentate on that.
I mean, you're edging around this idea of predictive intent, right? Like, how do we understand where the discrete intention of this individual is? And, how many people are putting into addresses? How many people are, back to your point, how many people are actually changing their address to Nigeria to be...
Maybe that prince came through and now they got a new mansion over there.
419, cut your dollar. There's a throwback for you, right? But that's it. Like, it's predictive intent, and using AI to be able to kind of get there is one of those things that we need to be really embracing. AI is going to be a part of a lot of this stuff. And, I can tell you with a lot of confidence that if you underpin your platforms with AI and they're starting to bring AI to the table, you're going to be pretty far ahead at this moment.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we need to be focused on. What's the probability? Can we run the probabilities in real time? Can we use
and it needs to be able to change too. It needs to be able to change as somebody goes through the session.
Yes, like, absolutely. Yeah, and being able to identify campaigns as they're underway. It's these kind of things that are going to be the differentiators. So recently, I was listening to a podcast of one of my favorite people. Won't go into detail on that.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah,
it was me. It
was early. And you said the most brilliant way possible. AI is going to be a big differentiator in creating a new class of individuals, and it's who is AI literate and who decides to not be AI literate. And if you take it on, then this world will open up to you. And if you don't, then you're going to suffer those consequences. It's like being able to learn a different language. And really, that's kind of the thing. So extrapolate that to our world of fraud, risk management, strategy, even operations, and recognize that having an AI co-pilot that's going to do some heavy lifting for you, be able to make you faster at writing up your cases, develop new strategies, identify campaigns. There's so many use cases that need to be quantified with this stuff. And we're well past the point of just saying, you know what, we're going to write killer rules and we're going to be good at it and we're going to be fast. We're just in a different space now, and it's time to grow.
And exactly. I've been saying for a while that, like, people ask me, like, are you worried that, like, AI is going to completely eliminate the fraud space? And I'm like, no, it's not going to. Right. It's not going to. It's going to enhance it. And we're already seeing that. Like, I'm on a lot of advisory boards with some of the solution providers. And they always ask me, like, where should we put AI? And, like, this is what we're doing with AI. And for me, like, just where I keep landing with it is, like, the people are still going to look at orders. They're still going to have to. But where AI could really help, and especially training new analysts, is filtering to the top what people should be looking at, making their eyes go to the spots they are, and then hopefully, I'm going to put hopefully there, they memorize and remember those things that they need to be looking for. So like bringing up even an individual order. Why is this order on my screen right now? And then you have a summary or even a co-pilot on the side that you could say, okay, tell me why I'm looking at this. And it highlights those problems for you, for the user. And then they can ask it real language questions. Okay, find me other orders that are similar to this and bring it up. And then now all of a sudden, they're doing what we used to do by hand, like querying SQL stuff, but they're doing it automatically and learning and finding fraud wings themselves there. And even to my point, it's like we started using years and years ago the AI, well, we used to call it machine learning engine, rule engine creation, where it would be finding these things for us. And instead of waiting for us to write a rule around that, it would just start like changing the score and essentially writing those rules on its own.
Yeah.
And that was a big game changer. And you know, one of the things that I have to reconcile is like it did remove me from being as hands-on with individual orders. I look at things at a really high level and big numbers now, but that's the case with any industry and any job where it used to be manual. Like people used to screw the top on every single jar, like a factory. And now a machine does that. And the people get to look at how many of those were successfully screwed on versus how many weren't, and then try and find the problem. Like automation has come at some point for every industry, and AI is automation, but you still have to have people knowing where to put it and putting it in its right place. And I think it's all going to simmer down to being like our assistant, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to do. And, you know, our assistant also makes flights for us, makes hotel reservations for us. Like, it's no different than that we used to have a person doing that we're having a machine help us do the heavy lifting. And to your point, what you said earlier, getting rid of those tedious, mundane tasks that are time consuming, that we are better used doing, playing the guitar, creating actual art.
Well, let's talk about one use case that is really dear to me right now. So I think scams are a big problem at this moment, and people are suffering.
That's real world people getting hurt from
horribly, in ways that I don't even want to bring up because there's harm, massive harm, and it really bothers me. And one of the things that I think is going to be really valuable that AI is going to bring to the table. So what if I built along the monitor journey, we have a bunch of indicators that light up, and our model says, hey, wait a minute, this looks scammy, because we see a bunch of features within the model light up and tell us that hey, this is high risk. But the problem with scams is we have the regular user, we have their regular device, we have their regular network, we have their regular behavior. Well, most of their regular behavior. This time we have unique elements that we're going to tease out, and that's going to be helping us. But it's not going to be as efficient as the old ways, right? When we were doing early card stuff on an ISO 8583 transaction.
You're going way back.
I'll bring it back, right? And you've got a dozen elements and fields to look from and say, okay, that could be good, and I got a 5-to-1 false positive, whatever. Scams are harder. The false positives go up, the alert rate goes up. To be able to do the same kind of detection.
Yeah, because it's real people,
because it's
from their real device
on their valid channels. And so you got to be looking at more. And we don't have the head count. It's too expensive. We're not going to get it. And so we need to find a way to cut that. So let's say we got a model that performs great, not perfect, but great. And what we can do with that is we can also apply an AI agent. And that AI agent says when the model is red pathing a transaction, we're going to put just a little more friction in and just start to ask a few questions via pop-up. So you got a Siam tool that's already doing a challenge or an MFA. It's the same kind of approach. So this is kind of how we've taken a look at it and said, all right, now here's where the human comes in. I need somebody who's a behavioral analyst to be able to say, all right, I want to go through all these elements and say, this could have the typology of X type of scam. Could be an extortion scam, could be a romance scam, but whatever the scam typology looks like, we're going to ask questions around it to be able to ferret out if this person is getting scammed. And if they are, we're going to ask them a couple of other questions that allow them to have that critical moment to think about what's happening we're going to inoculate those individuals. We're going to insulate the institution from reputational risk from having put the transaction through. There's good opportunities with AI to be able to work against AI enabled scams in this new environment.
So to your point on that, like, I think it's essentially comes back to the weakest link, and the weakest link in any fraud scheme is always the social engineering. Yeah. That's how businesses get sent fake invoices, and then somebody calls them and says, "Where's my money?" And then that's how the romance scams happen. And to your point, it's always originating from where it's supposed to be originating from. And it can be difficult. And then also, you know, especially when it comes down to the romance stuff, which Gen Z tends to be falling for that more than elderly people. But it is.
Well, hold on. Can I actually have an interesting conversation about that for a sec?
Yes, let's go.
It's all of us. Did you know? So when those studies were done, I won't cite the source, but trust me, bro. But what we observed is that they're equally split. If you really want to do it on the generational angle, you know, you just got to find the angle that works against these the individuals.
Good point.
Yeah. So what is Gen Z? They need jobs. They want investment opportunities. Great. Job scam, crypto scam. If it's Gen X, that's where I live. And what do we want? You know, maybe we're a little lonely, having had a family and it didn't work out for us. You know, that's got good opportunity for romance scams. Maybe we're still in the investment space. But if you're older, you're a boomer or something along these lines, you know, we found that they were really susceptible to remote access and impersonation scams. You know, there's a flavor for every victim, and that's
interesting.
Where it's landing, and it's almost equally split. That's the interesting thing.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Then thank you for educating me, because I kept hearing that it was the Gen Z, because to your point, it was the jobs. It was the they have a lot of online trust because they're of the generation that's always been on the internet. And like for millennials, like we have this weird hybrid thing where like we didn't have it at the beginning, and then we got it. So we started with that. You should never buy anything on the internet because somebody's going to steal your credit card, and off it goes. So there's a lot less trust.
Do you remember that joke for years? I love this joke because it really told the tale of the millennial, and it was like so many years ago. Never tell anybody your location or any payment information for fear that they'll come in and get you, right? And now you just literally put that into an application so that somebody can come pick you up.
Yep. And then, never get in a car with strangers. And now that's all you do all day long. Yeah. And I'm sorry, but like, I was in Richmond, Virginia this last weekend, and I was getting in cars with some people that I probably wouldn't normally get in cars with here in LA, but that's just, you get what you get, you know, you're in certain places, you know?
That's a fact.
Well, yeah, but it all comes back to like the social engineering. And to your point, like, I love the idea of basically approaching each situation as a unique situation. And all right, like, are somebody asking you to send you this money? Okay, who are they saying you're in jail? Is somebody you know in jail? You know, or is this a job scam? Are they asking you to go buy a laptop somewhere and wire them the money? Or did they send you a check and then tell you to wire them the difference? Like, there's a lot that could be done by just interjecting yourself, even as an AI. And you know, I've had other people on the show that talk about like how AIs they never get tired. Like they'll sit there and ask you questions until like the internet explodes and when a meteor hits the earth, you know?
Yeah.
Or, you know.
Well, we're going to, and that's the thing. Let's go back to the point about there's got to be a person there who actually is going to load the tool with the logic and tell it how it wants to operate, and ensure that, and yeah, at some point it's going to be just like rule writing back in the day, right? That our detection rate needs to be this high, and we're going to have the KPIs that say that capture is required to be in excess. So optimize the number of questions that we ask and change the behavioral element. You know, there's going to be all of those things, and it's just going to find new rivers to flow. And that's the world that we're going to be operating in really soon, I think. But few people in this hemisphere have really embraced that at this point. But I can tell you that's absolutely going to be the future. And I can tell you because I've seen it in other geographies. You know who's kicking our butts right now? The Australians. They've really turned the corner at this point. They're like in year 2 of a declining scam environment.
What are they? Are they using technology? Or do you know what they're?
Yeah. Well, they just took it seriously. That's the big difference. We're not
here. It's like a whole lot of "it's not my problem" type thing. You know.
Well,
like,
so let me put it this way. I was having a conversation with the board of directors, and they said, "Look, at the end of the day, it's not our business to tell our customers where they should spend their money." And I mean, that's a hard argument, right? But I think what they fail to actually realize is that it may not be, but if they're pretty unhappy with the way things went, then they're going to make it noisy, and that can have some big reputation risk. And they also fail to recognize that attrition is the ultimate cost, especially in the age of customer acquisition costs being so high. Then you're not doing yourself any services.
So, to your point, so yes, so I had Erin West on. You know who she is.
Yeah, of course.
So I had her on a couple of years ago, and I was of the thinking, probably like that board of directors, that if someone wants to send $1 million to this person and they're hell bent on doing it and they power through everything in front of them, why should I not let them? And she was very keen on the emotional aspect of it. But to your point, me as a bank should want that $1 million still in there, and that customer is still banking with me, because I'm making money on that, and if that money goes off to some random crypto bank in the middle of nowhere, then I don't have that money anymore, and then to your point, I don't have that customer anymore. And even if the customer sends half that money away and they move their other half to another bank that protected them, I do feel like there is, just like people always say for my website, is I have a duty to protect my consumers purchasing, to make sure that it's really them. A bank should have that same necessity to make sure that it's really doing all that it can to protect me and my money that I've entrusted to exist in their system. So
I mean, we're living in a much different customer experience world than we grew up in, and there is expectations that if things are unfair, that there will be remedies in place, and consumers have already kind of crossed that bridge, and we've enabled it. So at some point, policies shift, and you can see some of those policies shifting already, where there will be better reimbursement situations, and that exists even in other countries. And so they'll be bringing their expectations from a life in London back to New York and saying, okay, well, now Mr. New York International Global Bank, I want the same kind of handling that I was getting over at my bank in the UK. And they'll have to accommodate, because once you change the policy for one person, if a regulator asks you, well, was there disparate treatment in the next case? Why would you do such a thing? So a policy needs to exist in totality.
So, for years in this space, I've always been told that consumers are going to reject things like 3D Secure in the US.
Yeah.
And do you remember in 2015 when we did the EMV and we kept delaying the EMV requirements? And we started 2013 as what it was supposed to be. And then we pushed it back. In 2015, we did the hard cutoff. I think it was October. And we were like, oh, the sky's falling. No one's going to take it. Everybody just did it and moved on.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that big of a deal. And now it's so fast that it doesn't even matter. And the same thing, remember, one of the big things was the restaurant industry was well, how are we going to do the swipe and the tip and all that?
Cool now, isn't it? We're living in Europe.
Toast. When Toast, they bring the little thing over to me, and I get it, and it already has the tip included. Right. When I see it on my statement, I don't have to wait for it to post. I can just put my receipt. I can upload it to my expense report. It's done.
Yep.
I adore that system so much, and I have absolute trust in the end-to-end situation, because it's tap or it's chip. It's just done. And I say it's faster. It's so much faster than when I used to have to swipe the card and wait for the signature and tip it out. Oh.
Yeah.
We got to just do more. We got to just do.
Well, so I got to watch the Canadians. I was doing a lot of work in Canada for a while, and I got to watch the Canadians go through the EMV path first. And I really started feeling, by 2013, I really started feeling like we were living in a primitive age.
Yeah.
And then, what did it take to get EMV up? Target and Home Depot? Those were big pops. And, that doesn't mention all of the other merchant breaches that happened in the meanwhile. So that we could get to this nirvana state where we're just tapping cards or flashing QR codes. These are things that we should take a tip from our peers. And Australia really has been leading this space. So let's go through the playbook for just a moment, and I'm going to leave a lot of stuff out, but I think I can hit on a bunch of it. You know what? I might even have a cheat sheet handy and ready to go here. So the first thing that they did is they had a federal response, and that's a pretty big deal. If you can come up with a federal response and that federal response gives you some kind of benefit of understanding the nature of what we all need to do together, and we're all on board and we're all a part of this wonderful discussion, then we're going to be far better off. So they put a federal response together. The federal response said, thou must create a scam strategy and appoint somebody to lead it. Thou must. I'm going to make this all religious.
Dude, I love this. This is the King James federal response here.
Well, it's the holiday season for people, I imagine, to some degree, right? Thou must invest about $115 million to fight fraud at the national level. It's a good start, right? Thou must establish a national anti-scam center to centralize the collection and fusion of data. Thou must focus on taking down fake websites and ads. Thou must focus on aggressive blocking of scam phone calls and text messages. And thou must have a national level awareness campaign. I mean, these are all really important things, right? And they're on probably year 3. I know year 2 is already is in the rear view, and it's been like 33% declines year over year of these scams.
That's huge, because everywhere else it's going up. Like I just had another company on where they did their report, their state of the state, and it was going up here.
Yeah,
and that's huge.
Yeah.
QR code will be on the screen right now throughout this whole part of this discussion right here while we strategize. And for anybody that wants to scan and go to that. And yes, absolutely, that will be also in the description of this episode.
Perfect.
So, yeah. So as we wrap up, we do need to talk about transmit, because that's what we're here. And we kind of did throughout this process, but let's specifically talk about some of the cool things that you guys are proud of that are addressing some of this, you guys. So run me through it.
Yeah, well, again, we're identity led, so we recognize that fraud was a key component of having a full suite identity Siam tool set, and that includes ID verification, that includes orchestration. So when you bring a fraud fusion model to the table, you get something that's really specific. One of my thought leaders within the organization, David Motti, when I asked him the question, what makes identity plus fraud so unique, he turned it back at me and shut me up so quick. He says, well, isn't fraud just at its core an identity problem? I'm like,
he just really shaved that all down.
Yeah,
didn't he,
I was like, everything that I've learned and all the detail and nuance just went right into the bin. But he's right. If you don't know who your buyer is, and if your buyer doesn't know who's committing the purchase, or on whose behalf they're committing the purchase for, you've got an issue in every one of these use cases, right? Identity drives fraud to ends. And so that's kind of where it lives. And like I said before, if we can use identity and we can focus on user journeys and Siam elements to be able to emerge these use cases and outcomes, then fraud just becomes a natural fit within that tech stack. And so what we're trying to focus on is move that kill chain left where we can. Can we get to a place where we create less friction at points of payment, get higher fraud capture on the front end by looking at specific risk indicators that are demonstrative of high risk sessions, things that appear to be feature laden for problematic pieces of evidence and risk reasons. These are things that we can move to earlier in the user journey, or if we need to, we can have controls placed throughout the session that allow us to be able to prevent people from even getting to a point of payment and execution. And that's really the strategy that I think we want to lead with. I mean, certainly we're always going to have transactions that get to the get to a point of placement, and hopefully if those are social engineering, then we have that tool for the Gen AI discussion to be engaging that end user and preventing them from becoming a victim. But really, we want to be able to apply the friction throughout the journey using all of the tools at our disposal. And so we've just created the suite of the things that work, and I think that's the best evidence that we got a pretty good game.
And if I'm not mistaken, you guys do have a modular approach too, where people can buy the different modules that they specifically need, and then can add them on as their needs evolve or grow, or they realize they needed it more than they thought they did.
Yeah, and I found that this has really been quite significant. I'm seeing more of these clients, and it hasn't been long. I've been with the organization a quarter, but I'm seeing a lot of these clients. They go through their regular cycle and they say, you know what, we want more. We want to improve outcomes in this specific use case. We want to improve outcomes for this vulnerability that existed well before we even started with you guys. And we see that you're delivering for us and yes, make us insulated from these kind of attacks with these kind of controls. And so we work with them directly in any vertical to insulate them from things that they didn't anticipate or use cases that emerge.
Awesome. Well, anybody that wants to learn more, I am going to pop another QR code. This is a different QR code on the screen right now that you can scan to go to. And for anybody that's listening to the show, there will be a link to them in the description of this video. But for anybody that's listening and doesn't want to click a link, I'm going to give you a mouthful. That's going to be https://transmitsecurity.com/core-services/fraud-prevention. So it's a mouthful, everybody, but it'll get you there. It'll help you out, and you can learn more about their services and the modularity of it and all of that fun stuff. So as we wrap up, we've already talked about all of these in some capacity, but I like to do a rapid fire. What are the 3 things that you think will be in the future that people should be aware of? So what are those 3 things?
So I think, all right, I'm going to take the bait and I'm going to say it. The first has got to be Agentic AI. I think we all need to be recognizing this is going to be transformative, and for the reasons already suggested. Let me just take down that path. Okay, let me.
Yeah, please do, because I use it. Okay, so I use it.
So we all have an authentication process, and we have an authorization process that we're all going to need to engineer. And know that that's going to exist, because that's going to have impacts on liability and disputes and other fun things that haven't been flushed out yet. So we need to figure those pieces still. We also need to understand and recognize, are we inventorying all of these guys and being sure that you have the inventory? Back to the take on turning on the lights and watching the cockroaches scurry. What if the cockroaches are agents? Well, what if you could inventory all the agents and say, these are the choice ones that we like and appreciate and want to work with. These are the ones that we can't accept, right? And we just categorized them and gave a green path and a red path, and that was the way that we started to manage those. And then the third, let's talk a little bit about authorization and what authorization looks like. Because that's really one of the key things, and that's the last domino in the string. And authorization might look like step-ups, it might look like challenges or one-time passcodes that we use today. But how do you start to utilize those to be demonstrative that the end user who's authorizing really was a true user? Because you're going to start to see social engineering in that space. And you'll start to see account takeovers and other spaces there. So we need to be sure that we're using and applying the same kind of controls in those spaces as well. So those are 3 items in Agentics that we should care about and know about today.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to say, like, I've had a lot of conversations. I'm actually on the committee for the Merchant Advisory Group, the MAG, for their agentic stuff. And they're having some really, really great conversations directly with the partners in the space, not only like the actual players in the space, but the networks themselves, like the MasterCards, the Visas, and then some of the players that are making protocols like Stripes and things like that. Because there's there's the protocols are kind of like where everybody keeps trying to settle in. I personally am a direct guy. I just like to let them go direct, and I'll sort that out at the end. But I might not, how I do things isn't how everybody else needs to do things. So anybody that needs help, please call Transmit, right?
Cheers.
So one more time as we wrap up here, thank you for your time, Seth. I really appreciate it. Everybody else, that QR code to that mouthful link is going to be on the screen right here, as well as in the description of this video. I will put a link to Seth in this description as well, so you could reach out to him if you have any further questions. And I appreciate your time. Thank you, man.
That was great fun. Look forward to future discussions. Happy to have any follow-up conversations with anybody if they want to send me the DM.
There we go. All right, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks for listening to the episode. Earlier, we talked about why most network graphs have a serious blind spot. Here's what that blind spot might actually look like in the real world. To many fraud tools, that could look like dozens of unrelated signals, different devices, different accounts, no clear connection. But Incognia's network graph sees it differently because it's built on persistent device ID, one that survives reinstalls, resets, and tampering. The full picture stays intact. One fraudster, one network of devices and accounts, all coming from one physical location. To learn more about Incognia's network graph and device intelligence, scan the QR code below and thank them for being today's sponsor. We'll see you next time.